Hello and welcome to another drive-in double feature. I'm Ryan,
I'm Nathan.
and this is the podcast where we talk about two movies a week every Tuesday and Thursday. Before I get into anything at all, we have a Patreon over at patreon.com/drive-in double feature podcast. But Nathan, I was at my local liquor store picking up a bottle of Crystal Skull vodka, from the Dan Aykroyd's finest
Whoa, Dan
vodka.
Aykroyd's making that. I drink
Yeah.
I drink that daily.
It's very good. It's very refreshing. I love
Mhm.
Crystal Head vodka. It's
Yeah.
or Crystal Skull vodka, whatever. Yeah, it's great, and
Wow, wow, what a way to plug them.
I- it's really good. But like when I was waiting in line, somebody was just like, these prices of alcohol has really gone up, and it's really affecting my good time, have me having a good time. And they said, but what's always a good time is the Patreon for Driving Double Feature podcast, where they have fun topics, some conversation, playing some games, and just generally talking about movies over there. They say it's perfect. It's like the perfect amount of money to spend on a Patreon.
Mhm.
And I said, "Oh, it's really interesting." And they said, "Yeah, I really wish Nathan and Ryan knew how much we appreciated their podcast." And I said, "I think they know."
Mhm. Mhm. I think they know.
So anyway, it doesn't affect any regular content whatsoever. So please go check that out. But today we are talking about 1991's Nothing But Trouble, and it is directed, written, and starring Dan Aykroyd.
It is one movie.
His one directorial movie.
Yeah.
I would say this movie is pretty infamous.
Yes,
Um,
yeah. Very infamous box office bomb.
it is one of the biggest. It critically, it failed miserably. Financially, failed miserably too. It grossed $8 million at a $40 million budget.
$40 million.
That's
And
40. That's a 1990 money. That's not.
for
That's
for a
not today.
comedy, by the way.
Like $40 million now would be like a a a modest budget.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. But
So,
yeah, that's a ton.
but yeah, this movie, like I said, was Dan Aykroyd's kind of like brainchild, where it's based on some true events where, Dan Aykroyd was in like a rural town, and it was kind of like these really bullshit laws that he was seeing. And like, they basically just decided he was guilty on the spot for
Mhm.
speeding.
Mhm.
And he just was like, well, what if that was like a movie, and we could turn this into like a big horror comedy?
Mhm.
Because Dan Aykroyd, two of his specialties are comedy, and he loves horror elements to it. So he's
Yes.
like, perfect, let's just mash this up. So he actually wrote this script with his brother Peter Aykroyd, and the plan was to kind of shop this movie around to his like famous director buddies
Mhm.
and see if they would direct. And the whole time, he reached out to John Landis, who flat out refused to direct the movie because he just
Oh,
hated the script so much.
there's no kids in this one? No, thanks.
Where's the death? There's a kid death scene. I don't see it anywhere. Garbage. And just
In the trash.
um and then the other one was John Hughes, who had a passing interest in it, but ultimately did not go with it.
Mm.
So Warner Brothers wanted to make the movie. They didn't have a director. So what's the logical step? Direct it yourself, you idiot. So
Yeah.
Dan Dan Aykroyd kind of stepped up to the plate, even though he really did not want to do it, because he was like, he wanted to start what his original vision for the movie was, he wanted to do a dual role in this movie, which he does anyway, but
Yes.
he wanted to be the villain and the main star of this movie. So he wanted to play the Chevy Chase role and the judge role.
That I'm telling you, this is foreshadowing, but knowing how Chevy Chase does it, it probably been a little bit better that way.
It could have been. It very well could have
Um,
been.
from what I know, and I'm sure you'll get into it, this movie is just got messed with and thrown all around. It is not the vision that he had originally wanted.
No, and even the title of the movie, Nothing But Trouble, is not the title he wanted to go with. It was supposed to be uh, Valkenvania,
Vulcanvania.
Vulcanvania, where it was going to be the name of the town, and even he still thinks that's like a great, like that's what the title should be. Like he's like, I think of it as that still, not nothing but trouble. And
Hmm.
like I said, this movie got played a bunch with interference from Warner Brothers
Hmm.
because they wanted the movie to play out a certain way. So they asked to have John Candy in the movie, who is in this movie in a dual role as well.
Yes, yeah.
And like I said, Dan Aykroyd was originally going to star in the movie, doing both the protagonist and the antagonist. But instead, they Warner Brothers, because they had just had a big hit with Chevy Chase with like Christmas Vacation.
Hmm.
They were like, he is a bankable star. We want him in this movie, and they want this movie like a Chevy Chase movie.
Hmm.
So Dan Aykroyd was just kind of like, fine, I just want this movie to be made. Like I'll step aside. And
Hmm.
oh boy, that what like you kind of alluded to earlier, that may have been a mistake.
Oh yeah, for sure. Which is sad because, Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase both worked together at some point, and then I don't know. Yeah, we'll get into it.
Yeah, so I mean, the main plot of this movie, like I said, is Chevy Chase, this foreign couple that he knows that they're his friends.
And he calls them the Brazilianaires.
You're right. They're like it's a brother and sister. They're not a couple, I should say. They're
Yes, yeah.
brother and sister. And then a new girl who he meets, Demi Moore, and he wants to drive her and them to Atlantic City.
And let me tell you how much I hate this setup because it's so fast and makes no sense of them meeting in the elevator, Demi being like, oh, okay, you're going to this thing. I'm tagging along with you. You drive or I'll drive
Eh,
and then that's it. That's how the movie gets started,
eh,
literally.
yeah, and then they had like that scene where he's like, Chevy Chase is like, I'm not gonna, I don't feel like going today. And then he sees like Demi Moore come down in her dress or whatever. It's like, oh, ooga, like let me take that car. And it's
Uh,
like, and,
and
uh,
it even does it where it has like the camera and she's walking in slow motion to like a wooga type music.
yeah, definitely. And
Mhm. You can tell
uh,
almost immediately in this movie that Chevy Chase does not care about being in this movie. What an
absolutely not.
awful performance. What a way to just ruin a movie.
Yeah, I could not agree more. It is very clear that Chevy Chase is just here for the paycheck.
Hmm.
Um, because I mean, Chevy Chase can be funny. We've seen him be
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, I have no
We've
issue.
seen,
Like when he's funny, he's funny. Wait, go ahead.
yeah, but from what I could ascertain is that he did not really care about this movie. He thought the script was awful,
Hmm.
and people were talking about, like what a nightmare he was on set, where it was very much just like he was going into like being super antagonistic with Dan Aykroyd, basically telling him to his face, like, the only reason why this movie is being made is because of me, and like, so I have more value than you do, type of thing.
Yeah.
And then Demi Moore and Chevy Chase didn't really get along either, and
Hmm.
it was a really big mess where like nobody really cared for Chevy Chase on set, but it was kind of like one of those where they had to just kind of put up with it.
Yeah, because yeah, like he said, it was kind of true. I'm sure if Chevy Chase walked, the movie would have been just shut down.
Yeah, so it was very much just kind of like, but from what I've heard, that's pretty typical for a Chevy Chase movie, is like that type of behavior.
Yeah, yeah. Did you see what he said to the Benji dog on set? Oof, you don't want to hear that.
Exactly. But
Uh-huh.
but yeah, this one, it's Chevy Chase is not good in it, and it's very much like a really bad performance. But yeah, the point is they do go out of town. They're driving to Atlantic City, and they drive through a very, very small town, and
Vulcanvania.
right, Vulcanvania.
Hmm.
And the whole point was like they thought they were just getting a speeding ticket, and instead the police, which one of them played by John Candy's like, you need to come in to the judge, and he's gonna do that there. And basically, the judge just who shows up, which is Dan Aykroyd, playing as the antagonist as the judge, and
Mhm.
he has some of the like ugliest prosthetics I've seen until later in the movie.
Yeah.
Those were the ugliest, but this
It's
one
so
is the
hard to look at.
second ugliest.
I this is all I remember of this movie. So I actually have seen this movie before. I watched it when I was maybe like 10, 12, somewhere in there, preteen
And
age maybe.
you're like, oh, that was so funny. I
No,
can't wait to watch this.
I've shut it off. I remember because it was in the
Wait,
dollar
you shut
bin.
it off and you logged this on your letterbox as seen, Nathan?
Yes, I did. Some movies can be shut off.
Oh, oh my
Uh,
God. You didn't finish it. You can't put log it.
I can log it. I could do what I want
No,
on my
no,
letterbox. Yes, I can.
no. You can't do that.
I feel okay with rating this one.
You didn't finish the movie.
Well, here's the thing, Ryan. I finished it now. It's okay
Well then,
now.
well then you need to take off the it's a rewatch.
No, it stays as a rewatch. Because here's the thing, I remember it being in the dollar bin. I was reaching through. Remember at Walmart they had like the pile of movies? They still
Yeah.
sometimes do. And my dad was like, "Oh, you've never seen Nothing But Trouble? You should buy that." And I was like, "Okay, sure." And I remember the scene when they're eating at the table and Dan Aykroyd's face, his nose looks like a penis. And I remember
Hmm.
seeing that and being like, "That is disgusting." I hate this so much. And I still do. I still cannot stand the look at that.
Yeah. There's even because there's a scene because they all go to jail. They all get put in prison, and the scene's like, okay, we got food for you guys. Like, come on upstairs. And
Hmm.
they all come upstairs and they're just eating hot dogs, but
Hmm.
it's like really gross hot dogs, and it's just like mushing hot dogs into their face. It looks really disgusting.
Uh-huh.
And
And that's the point of the movie, I guess. You're supposed to be grossed out. It's nasty. It doesn't make it fun to watch. It's not funny because it's nasty, right? Like the nastiness doesn't make it funny, which I think the movie thinks it does.
that's what I've heard. So that like from what I read about the movie is that Dan Aykroyd, had this vision of this movie, and he like, and a lot of the imagery in it, he kind of thought up in his mind because I'm just gonna, Dan Aykroyd is not the most normal person. He's got a lot of out there kooky theories and like all
Oh,
that. So
yeah. He has a lot going on. And honestly, I guess I was reading that a lot of the stuff that was used, because it's almost like a landfill, like a hoarder's home. A lot of this stuff was from his personal collection, which I don't know what that means, but he had a personal collection of weird objects, I guess.
that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But from what I read, so one thing I will say about the what I read is that people did like Dan Aykroyd as a director, as far as on the set.
Yeah.
Uh, I've heard most of the crew were like, he was very nice, he was super open to ideas, that sort of thing, and he was really like, because it seems like in this movie to me, it's a hodgepodge of ideas, and there's no really direction with it. It's just like, oh, this is kind of kooky and weird, so we're just gonna put that in the movie type of thing.
No, I agree. The plot just doesn't feel it doesn't feel tight. It just feels very loose. It's like a bunch of like you said, just a bunch of ideas, and it leads to a plot that by the when I was getting to the end of this, I was like, well, what has really happened? Almost nothing has happened in this movie.
No, and it's a lot of the same beats where it's like they are in the house, they kind of break away, and they get captured again, break away, get captured again. That's a lot of repeat stuff like that.
Hmm.
And it's just the main plot is just like this house just keeps getting weirder and weirder, and it turns out that they were the ones that they had like this massive landfill of like bones and skeletons,
Hmm.
and they had all these driver's license of like famous people that had gone missing or
And then
other.
they got to throw in a Jimmy Hoffa joke.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
had to throw that one in.
Yeah, any movie about missing people, Jimmy Hoffa has to make a Easter egg appearance.
Yeah, I'm sure Rivera was upset that they found him in the house.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, when he was mining in like South Africa and then this empty cave, Jimmy Hoffa's not here.
You know,
Yeah, something like that. Um the one time a Jimmy Hoffa joke was funny was probably in Bruce Almighty when they find his body. That was it.
oh right. It's like, oh
Yes.
yeah, what is that? Jimmy Hoffman's.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that one's good.
But yeah, they kind of just keep going weirder and weirder. Like they keep showing like the judge being like really weird, doing weird stuff,
Hmm.
and just to show you how serious they are, because Chevy Chase and his group, the only thing they did was they ran a stop sign.
Yes, yeah.
And but then like another group comes in after them, and they're a bunch of low lifes pretty much. It's just like these like boozed up,
Oh,
guys and girls.
you just have to say Daniel Baldwin, and then I think people get
Uh,
the picture.
oh, true. Daniel
Yeah.
Baldwin and his crew shows up and they're all high on cocaine and
Yep.
drunk. And
Hmm.
they're like, oh, well, why did they show up on set like that? Well, let's just add that into the movie.
Yeah. Hey, it was became like a documentary. It was
yeah.
interesting. And then they killed him.
Yeah. No, but yeah, that's the saying is like they oh, that's what I was trying to make before about the point about Dan Aykroyd is that a lot of people like apparently he took a lot of feedback from people on the set and like,
Hmm.
hey, I've got this idea and I've got like let's try doing this type of thing. And he was just like, oh yeah, yeah, let's try it and type of thing. And this was one of them was the roller coaster,
Hmm.
where it was basically like they put people onto this super fast roller coaster. It just goes so fast that it kills them.
Yeah, like it goes into like a bone stripper and strips their bones. And I guess this roller coaster really worked, I guess, on set too, and was a part of the enormous budget that this movie shouldn't have had.
And I'm sure there's a piece from it sitting somewhere in a Planet Hollywood.
I'm sure, and at Dan Aykroyd's house, mansion,
I'm sure.
trailer, whatever he
uh,
lives in.
I'm sure. Um, but yeah, that's just to show you how serious they are about all this. And there's another cameo too in this movie. I'm a cameo that dates this movie severely.
Hmm.
Uh,
Oh yeah,
where
yeah.
like okay, because this movie is in the 90s, so one of the biggest songs at the time was by the group Digital Underground,
Yeah.
Do the Humpty Hump.
The Humpty Hump.
And
For whatever reason, I remember seeing this movie and them performing the Humpty Hump, which doesn't happen. I don't know why. I was like, in this movie they perform that song. They do not.
all around the world, like the song like nobody
Yeah,
even knows that from their catalog.
exactly.
Because they were a one-hit wonder group, like they had like that one hit and then that
Yep.
was it.
Hmm.
And the guy even shows up wearing the hat and the glasses from the Humpty Hump video.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah, and we talked about this before the show, but Tupac, who was a member of that group, this is his first film role.
yep, there's a little tiny cameo from Tupac in here, and he's actually listed in the credit as number two Pac.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah. And but the judge like they do like a whole musical number in this movie where it's like them playing a song and Dan Aykroyd's like getting into it like it's like oh yeah this is good and then he's just like yep you guys are free to go you're musicians get out of
Yeah,
here.
I love musicians. Yeah, that part is so like you said dated cuz like out of all the bands to make a cameo, Digital Underground so
Yeah.
1991. Like that's it.
Like this movie like was it like they were only relevant at the time this movie came out probably.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, they do that scene. And there's another scene where Chevy Chase and Demi Moore get split up,
Hmm.
and at a certain point, Demi Moore kind of falls out into this junkyard,
Hmm.
and there's these two mutant baby-looking creatures
Oh, I
called
hated
Bobo
this.
and Lil Dumbbell,
Yeah.
and And basically it's just they look disgusting for one. They look like they're just like dripping with sweat at all times, and that
Mhm.
they're very like mutated, where it's just like they're very heavy set, but it looks like their bodies are melting. It's
Yeah.
gross.
And their stomach like moves independently of their body, like it jiggles really weird, and they're wearing diapers. Uh they're horrible to look at. I could not stand it. Dan Aykroyd plays one of them, and it's just like the baby voice and everything. This was something out of a nightmare and not fun to watch.
Like I said, that nose, like Dan Aykroyd's prosthetics on that scene was already bad enough, and I'm
Mhm.
like, then you watch this part, and you're just like, it somehow gets worse.
Yeah,
Eh,
and then there's the scene where Demi is like in the cage playing poker with them, and she's talking to them in a baby voice. And there was something I really hated about that. It's just like I can't stand it.
well, I mean, like, because at first they capture her, and you're thinking, oh no, something bad's going to happen to her. But then they just start playing cards, like you said, and then she's like acting like they're friends, like, oh hey, Bobo, like man, like just
Mhm.
uh. And then at one point, it's like, if I win, I get Diane, and she's just like, oh you, like type of thing. And it's
Yeah,
like,
like it's not a big deal. Like these guys aren't bad. Um,
right,
we haven't even talked about John Candy's character yet, probably because he's not in a lot of the movie. The his
no,
male character, I should say.
the male character is nothing. I don't
He,
think. I mean,
yeah, he's a cop, and he wants to be a real cop, and he feels bad that the real law isn't laid down, and then he's gonna quit, and
and
that's it.
he hates that he hates that he doesn't have enough vacation time or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Because the Brazilian people are like, "Oh, you need a vacation," and that's
And he's
it.
just like, you ain't wrong there, bucko.
Mhm.
And then that's he at the end of the movie, you see him show up, and he's like a security guard for them in Brazil.
Mhm.
And they do that, and then he has John Candy also plays his twin sister in this movie, Eldonna. I think
Yeah,
Eldonna.
yeah, Eldona, I think.
Yeah, Eldonna. And it's just, it's like the whole joke is it's like it's John Candy and drag, and it's funny.
Yeah, and he's mute too, so he only mimes. And yeah, it isn't. I didn't think it was funny.
I mean, like, I didn't laugh, but when I first saw him in drag, I was like, okay, that's kind of amusing.
Uh-huh.
And but then I'm just like, they don't do anything with it. It's just like him standing there like in drag, like
Yeah, there's like one scene where it seems like he's going to sleep with Chevy Chase's character, but that doesn't go anywhere. It gets
no.
interrupted very quickly.
Yeah, so it ends up being a kind of a nothing scene.
Hmm.
A- And at the end, they kind of start breaking out of they want to break out of the house, and Chevy Chase is able to get Demi Moore out of there, and they escape via a train,
Hmm.
and they go into like a local town over there, like the next town over, and they go to the police like thinking like, please, 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 like, you need to go over there and like put a stop to them. And you think in the movie that they're going to be like, you guys are crazy, like, that we don't know what you're talking about type of thing. But
Hmm.
then as soon as they were like, well, we need you to come over here and identify. I already called it there. I'm like, oh, they're going to be in on it, aren't they?
I thought it was going to be a dream sequence or something, because, or at least as it went on, because it gets insane at the end. But no, it's all real, and yes, they are in on it because there's a coal. It's built on like a coal mine that might explode, and it does explode just right then at that moment when everybody shows up.
Yeah. It's very much like they're like, because Chevy Chase and Demi Moore show up back at the house thinking
Mhm.
that they're there for the cops. Because even the cops are like, go to the front door and see if they'll come outside. And Dan Aykroyd starts coming out at first, being like, "Oh, I'm just a feeble old man. Like, what are you doing? You're bothering me." And then just he's like, "Ah, just kidding," type of thing. And
Mhm.
uh, it's like you said, the whole place ends up exploding because they're on top of an oil, right? Oil, like
Uh,
untapped oil.
I'm not. I guess. I think
Yeah,
so
but
because that's what's up in the end.
that's what blows up.
Hmm.
And you're thinking like, okay, this judge character is dead. And Chevy Chase and Demi Moore go back to one of their apartment, I think his or hers or what doesn't matter. And
Hmm.
at the end of the movie, they're like, it's the a newscaster's there. It's like, oh yes, like this town just exploded, Vulcanvania, and oh hello, sir. Like, what are you doing? It's like, well, this my house just blew up, and it's the judge, Dan Aykroyd. He's like, but I'm gonna go see my new son-in-law, Chris Thorpe. You know,
Oh yeah,
Chevy Chase.
because Chevy
Eh,
Chase and Eldana they get married.
right. They got married technically, and
Yeah.
he's got Chevy Chase's ID, and he's just like, I'm coming to see you in New York City,
Hmm.
and Chevy Chase does like a cartoon like bashes through the wall like in the perfect shape of him.
Which is so weird because this movie doesn't really have cartoony humor.
No, they never have like cartoon violence or anything like that. And I was just like, that's weird. Like, why would?
Yeah.
But anyway, all in all, this movie, like I said, was a critical disaster. Did not
Hmm.
make any money, and it's pretty well known that not a lot of people liked it. If you ask Dan Aykroyd, though, they asked him like, why did he think this movie failed?
Hmm.
Because this movie pretty much ends Dan Aykroyd's like directorial career like right then and there.
Yes. Yeah.
And according to him, he's like, well, the Gulf War was happening, and Julia Roberts movie just came out, and a Jodie Foster movie just came out, and we had a lot of things working against us, so nobody went to go see the movie. But
Hmm.
basically he's like, but now, people watch it on DVD and they tell me what how great it is. And just
Yeah. Uh-huh. Sure. I
and
mean,
I'm like,
I know this movie has gained a cult status though.
this movie does have a cult following. There
Hmm.
are fans of this movie because there's a guy like on YouTube I saw was like, oh, here's some 10 little known facts about this movie. And but he's just like reading from the IMDb trivia. It's
That's
just,
so funny.
but it's not a great movie at all, in my opinion. It's pretty miserable. Like it's labeled as a horror comedy, and I'm like, is it scary? No. Is it funny? No. It's I don't I don't know who this movie is made for.
Hmm.
It's like because it's like it's not made for little kids. I can't imagine it being made for I mean, it just would only be in like for people that love weird movies. That's like just have weird imagery in it. Like it's like the same people they're like, I like watching Pail Kids because the little Garbage Pail Kids are so ugly.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. It's just miserable. I think you use that word. It's just a
Yeah,
miserable movie. Like it's just not funny and it's definitely not scary, but I think it's more meant to be a comedy, but it just never made me laugh once. I didn't really think it was amusing. It's really plotless at the end of it all, and I never felt like there was anything that I could latch on to. And it just nothing worse than a bad comedy, as something that has been said multiple times on this podcast and will continue to be said.
absolutely. It just was not a very fun movie. Like I said, it's miserable. I don't in one of the ugliest movies I've ever seen.
Oh
Just
yeah.
just like the prosthetics in there look disgusting. The food they eat looks gross, and then it looks awful. Um, but like I said, Dan Aykroyd pretty much did not have a career for like the longest time after this movie,
Hmm.
and because this movie because this was his baby. Like whatever you see in here is like he had full control of it. So
Yes, yeah. And I
almost.
think I read that 40 million, they trusted Dan to give him a movie and gave him $40 million. And like, let's say he broke that trust, and $40 million is a lot to rake someone's trust over.
Well, like I said, this is a very expensive movie. This movie went way over budget too.
Yeah.
So this movie should not have gotten to this point where it was so inflated, but they're just like, okay, yeah, like that's sounds about right.
Hmm.
And, and this movie, just like I said, failed miserably, kind of ended those careers. But would I recommend it? No, no, I would not.
No, me either. Nope.
This is stay far away from this one, I would say.
Yeah.
Um, but that's going to do it for this one. So, Nathan, what are we going to be talking about next week?
So next week we actually have a recommendation. I'm going to pull out a recommendation. We haven't done one of those in a little while from someone
Oh my
named
God.
Ryan. Okay. Weird. And what did he recommend? He recommended No Small Affair. He said, I'm a huge fan of John Cryer, and I would really love it if you could cover one of his movies next week. And you know what, Ryan? Why not? Let's do it. So yeah, we're doing No Small Affair, which is streaming right now on Tubi. But 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 Ryan, oh, weird, you guys have the same name. What a coincidence.
I'm legitimately upset right now.
You're legit. But Ryan, what are we covering on Thursday?
Well, Nathan, this actually comes in recommended from you.
No.
And Nathan, I know what a big dog head you are. You're always talking about dogs.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
So,
getting dogged on.
so Nathan, we're going to be talking about the 1983 movie Play Dead,
Play
which
dead.
is which is streaming for free on Tubi right now.
All right. I'm excited to watch Play Dead.
Oh, I am too. I cannot wait. I
Mhm.
cannot sleep a wink thinking about these two movies.
Oh boy, it's gonna be a good week.
But anyway, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for stopping by and listening. If you have any thoughts and opinions, please give them to us over at Drive and Double Feature Podcast at gmail.com. Don't forget to follow the Patreon at patreon.com/Drive and Double Feature Podcast. And hey, check out the YouTube channel as well, where you can basically watch our reviews. You could watch an audio clip of this movie, of this review. And it's over on Drive and Double Feature Podcast at
Yeah.
Gmail. Drive and Double Feature Podcast on YouTube. But that's going to do it. Until next time.
Until next time.